The rejection letter wasn't what broke me. It was the silence that followed when I showed it to my parents at dinner. The way my mother continued cutting her steak as if I hadn't just placed my entire future on the table between the salt and pepper shakers. My father glanced at it briefly, then looked at me with that familiar expression of mild inconvenience, like I was a bill that had arrived unexpectedly in the mail. "We can't afford it, Sophia," he said simply, returning to his meal. "We've already put your brothers and sister through college. There's nothing left." I wanted to scream. I wanted to flip the table and watch their carefully arranged lives scatter across the floor like the broken pieces of my dreams. Instead, I sat there, feeling the weight of 18 years of being the afterthought, the accident, the one who came along when they thought they were done raising children. "But you paid for Marcus's medical school," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "And Julia's law degree. And when Nathan wanted to study abroad for his MBA, you didn't even hesitate." My mother finally looked up, her eyes cold and practical. "They showed promise early on. We had to make investments where they would pay off." Investments. That's what my siblings were. And me? I was apparently a bad stock option, not worth the risk. The irony wasn't lost on me. While my siblings had coasted through high school with B's and C's, I had worked myself to exhaustion for straight A's. While they had spent their summers at the country club, I had been volunteering at the hospital lab, falling in love with the precise beauty of chemistry, the way elements combined and transformed into something entirely new. My chemistry teacher, Mrs. Chen, had written me a recommendation letter that made me cry, calling me the most talented student she'd had in 20 years of teaching. But none of that mattered at this dinner table, in this house where my achievements were as invisible as I had always been. "I got into state college," I said, pushing the acceptance letter toward them. "With partial scholarship. I just need help. With the rest." "Partial isn't enough," my father said. "We're not taking out loans at our age. You'll have to figure something else out." Figure something else out, like I'd been doing my whole life, figuring out how to make Julia's old clothes look presentable for school. Figuring out how to get to science competitions when they were too busy driving Nathan to lacrosse practice. Figuring out how to exist in a family where I was clearly the punctuation mark at the end of a sentence they'd already finished writing. I left the table without another word, the acceptance letter crumpled in my fist. In my room, the smallest bedroom, of course, barely bigger than Marcus's walk-in closet in his new house. I sat on my bed and stared at the periodic table poster on my wall. Every element had its place, its purpose, its unique properties that made it essential to the whole. I used to find comfort in that order, that certainty. Now it mocked me. The knock on my door was soft, hesitant. "Come in," I said, expecting my mother with some half-hearted attempt at consolation. Instead, it was my grandmother, her silver hair, catching the light from the hallway. "I heard everything," she said, settling beside me on the bed with a soft grunt. Her hands, wrinkled and spotted with age, found mine. "Your parents are fools. Grandma, no, let me speak." Her voice was firm, reminding me why she'd been the only one to attend my science fairs, the only one to frame my award certificates. "I've watched them do this to you for years, always putting you last, always finding excuses. Well, I won't stand for it anymore." She reached into her pocket and pulled out a worn checkbook. "I don't have much, but I have my savings. You can live with me while you go to state college. We'll make it work." I stared at her, this woman who lived on Social Security and grew her own vegetables to save money. "Grandma, I can't take your savings." "You're not taking anything," she said fiercely. "I'm investing in the only one of my grandchildren who's worth a damn. The others? They got handed everything, and what did they do with it? Marcus is a mediocre doctor who cares more about his golf handicap than his patients. Julia spends more time shopping than practicing law. And Nathan? He used that fancy MBA to become a middle manager who spends his days in meetings about meetings. She cupped my face in her hands. But you have fire, Sophia. You have hunger. And that's worth more than all the money your parents threw at your siblings. I moved in with her the next week. My parents barely protested, seeming almost relieved to have one less mouth to feed, one less person to disappoint. My siblings were too wrapped up in their own lives to notice. Julia sent a text saying it was probably for the best, and Marcus didn't respond at all to my messages. Nathan at least called, but only to ask if I could still babysit his kids for free on weekends. Living with Grandma was like breathing for the first time. Her small apartment became my sanctuary, her kitchen table my study desk. She'd make me coffee at midnight when I was drowning in organic chemistry homework, and she'd quiz me on molecular structures while making breakfast. But even with her help, money was tight. The partial scholarship covered tuition, but there were books, lab, fees, living expenses, so I got a job at a 24-hour diner working the night shift. Then I added tutoring high school students in chemistry and math. Then I started cleaning offices on weekends. My days became a blur of lectures, labs, work, and study, fueled by caffeine and determination. While my former classmates were posting photos from parties and spring break trips, I was memorizing reaction mechanisms and serving coffee to truckers at 3 a.m. The exhaustion was bone deep, the kind that made me hallucinate during particularly brutal shifts. I'd see chemical equations floating in the air while I wiped down tables, molecular structures dancing in the steam from the coffee machine. My professors began to notice the dark circles under my eyes, the way I'd sometimes drift off during lectures despite my front row seat and meticulous notes. Dr. Harrison, my analytical chemistry professor, pulled me aside after class one day. "Sophia, your work is exceptional, but you look like you're about to collapse. What's going on?" I gave him the practiced smile I'd perfected, the one that said everything was fine. "Just working hard, Professor." He studied me with the same intensity. He applied to spectrometry readings. "How many jobs are you working?" 3, I admitted reluctantly. His eyebrows shot up. 3? How are you maintaining a 4.0 GPA while working 3 jobs? "I don't sleep much," I said, trying for humor. It fell flat. He was quiet for a moment, then said, "Have you heard of the Eastridge University Transfer Program? They have full scholarships, available for exceptional chemistry students. Full ride, tuition, room, board, even a stipend for research." Eastridge. It was like he'd said Harvard or MIT. The chemistry program there was legendary, the kind of place where Nobel laureates taught freshman seminars and undergraduate research could change the world. "I could never get in there," I said automatically. "Your grades say otherwise, so does your lab work." He pulled out a business card. "This is my colleague there, Dr. Sarah Martinez. She runs a research group focusing on novel drug delivery systems. I think you'd be perfect for her team. Let me make some calls." I took the card with shaking hands. Hope was dangerous in my experience, but I couldn't help the flutter in my chest. The application process was grueling. Essays, interviews, research proposals. I wrote my personal statement at the diner during slow hours, crafting sentences between refilling coffee cups. I practiced my interview answers while cleaning offices, my voice echoing in empty conference rooms. My grandmother helped me buy a second-hand suit for the final interview, insisting on paying for proper alterations so it would fit perfectly. "You look like a scientist," she said, tears in her eyes as she adjusted my collar. "You look like someone who's going to change the world." The acceptance letter came on a Tuesday. I was in the middle of my shift at the diner when my phone buzzed. I nearly dropped a full pot of coffee when I read the email. Full scholarship, research position with Dr. Martinez, a stipend that would mean I could quit all my jobs and focus on what I loved. I called my grandmother first, sobbing into the phone while my manager yelled at me to get back to work. Then, stupidly, hopefully, I called my parents. "That's nice, dear," my mother said vaguely. I could hear the television in the background. "Will you be home for Nathan's birthday party next month?" "Mom, This is Eastridge. It's one of the best chemistry programs in the country. I got a full scholarship. Well, try not to let it go to your head. Marcus was just published. In a medical journal, you know. A real accomplishment. I hung up without saying goodbye. The next 2 years at Eastridge were everything I'd dreamed of and more. Dr. Martinez became my mentor, pushing me harder than anyone ever had, while somehow also believing in me more than I believed in myself. Her lab became my second home, the place where I finally felt like I belonged. We were working on developing a new drug delivery system using polymer nanoparticles, trying to find a way to target cancer cells more precisely while minimizing damage to healthy tissue. You have an intuitive understanding of molecular interactions, Dr. Martinez told me one day as we reviewed my latest results. It's rare to see that in someone so young. I thrived under her guidance, publishing my first paper as a co-author before my junior year ended. My grandmother framed a copy of it, hanging it in her living room next to my baby pictures. She'd tell anyone who would listen about her granddaughter, the scientist, the one who was going to cure cancer someday. The breakthrough came during my senior year. I'd been working on a modification to our polymer design, something that had occurred to me during a particularly sleep-deprived night in the lab. It was unconventional, the kind of idea that would have been dismissed if I'd proposed it as a freshman. But Dr. Martinez had taught me to trust my instincts, to follow the science wherever it led. The results were better than we dared to hope. Our modified nanoparticles showed a 70% improvement in targeting efficiency, with drastically reduced side effects in preliminary tests. Dr. Martinez stared at the data for a full minute before turning to me with tears in her eyes. "Sophia, do you understand what you've done? This could change everything." The paper we published made waves in the scientific community. Suddenly, I was getting interview requests, conference invitations, offers from top graduate programs. A major pharmaceutical company expressed interest in licensing our technology. My inbox was flooded with opportunities I'd never imagined possible. The call from the National Science Foundation came on a Thursday afternoon. I'd been selected for their prestigious Young Innovator Award, which came with a $50,000 grant and national recognition. The ceremony would be in Washington, D.C., with media coverage and representatives from major research institutions. I was in my apartment, still processing the news, when my phone rang. Unknown number, but local area code. "Sophia? It's Nathan." I hadn't heard from my brother in over a year. "Nathan? How did you—" "Mom saw something online about an award. Said you're going to be on the news or something?" Ah, there it was. "Yes, I won an award for my research." That's great, Soph. Really great." He paused, and I could practically hear him working up to something. "So, I was wondering, I'm starting this new business venture, and I could really use an investor. I thought maybe with your success and all." I laughed. I couldn't help it. It started as a chuckle and built into full-bodied laughter that left me gasping for breath. "Soph? What's so funny?" "You," I managed between giggles. "This, everything. You want me to invest in your business?" "With what money, Nathan?" "The money I made working 3 jobs to put myself through college because our parents couldn't be bothered? Or maybe the scholarship money I earned while you were getting your MBA handed to you on a silver platter?" "Hey, that's not fair, isn't it?" The laughter died as quickly as it had come. "Tell me, Nathan, where were you when I was surviving on ramen and 4 hours of sleep? Where was this brotherly concern when I was cleaning toilets to pay for textbooks? We didn't know because you didn't care enough to ask." I took a deep breath. "I'm not your ATM, Nathan. I'm not your connection or your ticket to success. I'm the sister you forgot existed until I became useful." I hung up before he could respond. The calls started coming fast after that. Julia wanted to know if I could get her daughter an internship at my lab. Marcus thought I might be able to introduce him to some pharmaceutical executives. My parents, who hadn't called once during my entire time at Eastridge, suddenly wanted to have dinner, to catch up, to celebrate my success as a family, I ignored them all. The award ceremony was everything I dreamed of and more. I wore a new dress, one I'd bought myself with my own money, that fit perfectly and made me feel like the scientist I'd become. Dr. Martinez was there, beaming with pride. And in the front row, wearing her best dress and clutching a handkerchief, was my grandmother. When I gave my acceptance speech, I talked about the importance of mentorship, of believing in potential even when others don't see it. I thanked Dr. Martinez for her guidance, my professors for their wisdom, and my lab mates for their collaboration. And then I looked directly at my grandmother. Most of all, I want to thank the one person who believed in me when no one else did. My grandmother, who invested not just her money, but her faith in a girl who was told she wasn't worth the investment. Grandma, this award belongs to both of us. The standing ovation was led by my grandmother, tears streaming down her face as she clapped harder than anyone else in the room. After the ceremony, as I was posing for photos and answering questions from reporters, I saw them. My parents, standing at the edge of the crowd, looking older than I remembered and somehow smaller. My mother was wearing her best dress, the one she saved for Marcus's hospital fundraisers. My father had his hands in his pockets, the way he did when he was uncomfortable. They tried to approach me, but I was swept away by a group of researchers wanting to discuss collaboration opportunities. By the time I looked back, they were gone. Later, in the hotel room my grandmother and I were sharing, she handed me an envelope. This came to my apartment last week. I wasn't sure if I should give it to you. It was from my parents. A card with a generic congratulations message and a handwritten note inside. Sophia, we're so proud of what you've accomplished. We always knew you were special. We'd love to have you home for the holidays so we can celebrate as a family. Maybe you could tell your siblings about your work. They'd be so inspired. Love, Mom and Dad. I read it twice, then handed it back to my grandmother. They always knew I was special. Revisionist history, she said with a snort. They're rewriting the past to make themselves feel better. I thought about all the dinners where my achievements went unnoticed, all the science fairs they missed, all the times they told me I was asking for too much when all I wanted was what they'd freely given my siblings. I thought about the night they told me I wasn't worth the investment. What are you going to do? Grandma asked. I looked at her, this woman who had given me everything when she had so little. I'm going to live my life. I'm going to do groundbreaking research. I'm going to mentor young scientists who are told they're not worth investing in. And I'm going to do it all without them. She smiled and squeezed my hand. That's my girl. I started graduate school that fall, diving into my research with the kind of passion that only comes from proving everyone wrong. My work continued to gain recognition, leading to partnerships with major research institutions and pharmaceutical companies. I was invited to speak at conferences, to serve on advisory boards, to mentor the next generation of scientists. My siblings continued to reach out periodically, always when they needed something. Julia wanted legal advice for a patent issue. Marcus thought I might know someone who could help his practice. Nathan had another business idea that just needed a little capital to get started. I responded to none of them. My parents sent Christmas cards with family photos that I wasn't in, as if emphasizing my absence. They'd write little notes about how proud they were, how they'd always believed in me, how they wished I would come home. I threw them away unopened after the first few years. The only family I needed was my grandmother, who moved into a nicer apartment that I insisted on paying for. She protested at first, but I reminded her that she'd invested in me when no one else would. This was just dividends being paid out. You don't owe me anything, she'd say. I owe you everything, I'd respond. When my first major patent was approved, the one that would eventually lead to a new treatment for certain types of lung cancer, I thought about calling my parents. The urge lasted about 30 seconds before I remembered that night at the dinner table, the way they dismissed my dreams as easily as clearing dishes. Instead, I called my grandmother. We celebrated with Chinese takeout in her apartment, toasting with grape juice in coffee mugs. "Your parents are missing out," she said, watching me with the kind of pride I'd craved my whole childhood. They had gold in their hands and threw it away. "Their loss," I said, and for the first time I truly meant it. Years passed. My research flourished. I built a team of brilliant young scientists, many of whom reminded me of myself, hungry, overlooked, desperate to prove themselves. I made sure they knew they were valued, that their ideas mattered, that someone believed in their potential. I became the mentor I'd needed, the advocate I'd never had. When my grandmother got sick, I took a leave of absence to care for her. My siblings sent flowers, my parents sent a card. I was the one who sat by her bedside, who held her hand through chemo treatments, who made her laugh with stories from the lab. "I'm so proud of you," she whispered one afternoon, her voice weak but her eyes still bright. "You became everything I knew you could be." "Because of you," I said, squeezing her hand. "Only because of you," she smiled. "No, my dear, I just gave you a chance. You did the rest yourself." She passed away on a Tuesday morning as the sun streamed through her hospital window. I was there, holding her hand, telling her about my latest research breakthrough. She died knowing that her investment had paid off in ways she'd never imagined. On her funeral, my entire family showed up. My parents, looking frail and uncertain. My siblings, successful in their mediocre ways, uncomfortable in their black suits. They tried to act like we were a close family, like they had any right to grieve the woman who had saved me when they'd thrown me away. During the reception, my mother cornered me. "Sophia, please, we're family. Your grandmother wouldn't want us to be estranged like this." I looked at her, this woman who had given birth to me but had never truly seen me. "My grandmother was my family. She was there when you weren't. She believed in me when you didn't. She invested in me when you said I wasn't worth it. Don't you dare invoke her name to try to guilt me into forgiving you." "We made mistakes." "No," I interrupted. "A mistake is forgetting a birthday or missing a school play. You made a choice. You chose to invest in my siblings and not in me. You decided I wasn't worth it. And now that I've proven you wrong, you want to pretend it never happened." My father appeared at her side. "Sophia, be reasonable. We're getting older. Don't you think it's time to put the past behind us?" I laughed, but there was no humor in it. "The past? You mean my entire childhood? The nights I stayed up studying while you took Nathan to expensive SAT prep courses? The science fairs you missed because Julia had a dance recital? The college dreams you crushed because you'd spent everything on Marcus's medical school? We did our best. Your best was telling an 18-year-old girl that she wasn't worth investing in. Your best was letting me struggle while my siblings got everything handed to them. Your best wasn't good enough." I started to walk away, but my mother grabbed my arm. "We're your parents, Sophia. Doesn't that mean anything to you?" I looked down, at her hand on my arm, then back at her face. Being parents means more than just biology. It means showing up. It means believing in your children, all of them. It means not playing favorites and then expecting the one you neglected to welcome you back with open arms when they succeed despite you. I gently removed her hand from my arm. "I have a plane to catch. I'm giving a keynote speech at a conference tomorrow. You know, the kind of success you never thought I'd achieve." As I walked away, I heard Julia call out, "You'll regret this, Sophia. Family is forever." I turned back one last time. "No, Julia. Family is chosen. And I choose the people who chose me when I needed them most. That was never any of you." I left them there, clustered together in their shared mediocrity, and went back to the life I'd built without them. The life my grandmother had made possible with her faith and her savings account, and her unwavering belief that I was worth investing in. My research continued to save lives. My mentees went on to make their own discoveries. I built a legacy based on merit and hard work, not on the circumstances of my birth or the financial advantages I'd been denied. Sometimes, late at night in my lab, I'd think about my parents. Not with anger anymore, but with a kind of distant pity. They'd had 4 children and had only seen value in 3. They'd missed out on knowing the daughter who would go on to change the world, all because they couldn't see past their own prejudices and favoritism. Their loss, as my grandmother would have said. Their loss entirely. I kept my grandmother's picture on my desk, right next to my diplomas and awards. When young scientists came to me, worried about funding or family support or whether they were good enough, I'd tell them her story. How a woman living on Social Security had seen potential where others saw none. How she'd invested her meager savings in a granddaughter everyone else had written off. Find your believers, I'd tell them. The people who see your worth when the world doesn't. And when you succeed, and you will succeed, remember to become that person for someone else. The last time I saw my parents was 5 years after Grandma's funeral. I was receiving a Lifetime Achievement Award, and they somehow got tickets to the ceremony. They looked older, smaller, diminished by time and perhaps by regret. They didn't try to approach me this time, just watched from their seats as I gave my speech. I talked about my grandmother again, about the power of believing in someone's potential. I talked about the students I'd mentored, the lives saved by our research, the future we were building one discovery at a time. And I talked about resilience, about succeeding not because of your circumstances, but in spite of them. When I finished, the audience gave me a standing ovation. Everyone except my parents, who remained seated, perhaps finally understanding that they'd lost the right to celebrate my achievements the night they'd told me I wasn't worth the investment. After the ceremony, I found a note tucked under my windshield wiper. My mother's handwriting, shaky with age. We're sorry. We were wrong. You were worth everything. I read it once, then let the wind take it from my fingers. It fluttered away like all the opportunities they'd denied me, all the faith they'd failed to have. Too little, too late, carried away on the breeze. I drove home to my life, my work, my chosen family of colleagues and mentees and friends who had seen my worth when it mattered. The people who had invested in me, not after I'd proven myself, but before, when investment required faith rather than certainty. That's the difference between real family and blood relations. Real family shows up when you're nobody. Blood relations show up when you're somebody and wonder why you won't let them share in your success. I never responded to my mother's note. There was nothing left to say. She'd made her choice 18 years ago at a dinner table, dismissing my dreams with the casual cruelty of someone who couldn't be bothered to see potential in their own child. I'd made mine in a grandmother's small apartment, choosing to believe in myself when no one else would. We both had to live with our choices. The difference was, I was proud of mine. My grandmother used to say that success was the best revenge, but she was wrong about that. Success isn't revenge. It's freedom. Freedom from needing their approval, their validation, their belated recognition. Freedom to build a life on your own terms, surrounded by people who value you for who you are, not what you can do for them. That's what I found in my laboratory, in my research, in the students I mentored and the lives our work saved. I found a purpose bigger than the family that had failed me, a legacy more lasting than their conditional love. And in the end, that was worth more than all the college tuition they'd saved by writing me off. It was worth everything.